Today we have a group of some of the leaders and innovators of the marijuana law reform movement. The question that faces all of us is, how do we get from where we are right now, which is certainly early in the stages of reform? We have medical marijuana laws in several states. In the 70s, we decriminalized marijuana in some states, although the penalties and the stakes are still quite high. A number of cities have deprioritized marijuana enforcement. But how do we get to the next step where we are decriminalizing marijuana possession for adults so that there is no penalty or that the fine is very small? And how do we ultimately get to a model where we tax and regulate marijuana? On our panel today, we have Mikki Norris from the Cannabis Consumers Campaign. We have Pierre, Executive Director of NORML. We have David Frankel from Vote Hemp and the Hemp Industries Association. We have Alison Holcomb from the ACLU of Washington. And we have Kris Krane from Students for Sensible Drug Policy, the Executive Director, and I'm Dominic Holden.
Yay.
Do we have a preference as to who we start with?
Why don't we start with you?
Start with me? I'm going to be starting off. It's very exciting. I think that one of the most exciting things happening right now is the bill in Congress introduced by Barney Frank, but it's actually not what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to leave that, I hope, to Alan. All the polling that we've got for marijuana law reform, the people in support of it, they share a common bond, and that is that most of them, at least, know someone who smokes marijuana, or they used to smoke marijuana. And that is really the key in many ways. We have so many marijuana smokers in the United States. How do we actually let people know that they know a marijuana smoker, so that when an initiative goes on the ballot, that they are more inclined to vote to pass that measure? And I think that that really comes in two fronts. The first is people need to be more upfront, and they need to say, hey, I smoke pot. And especially if you're not dressed like a dirty hippie, then it's going to go over really well, because people want to know that marijuana is not something that's just smoked by a bunch of dirty hippies. They need to know that it's smoked by average mainstream Americans. The problem is that hippies are actually the ones doing the work and throwing the Hempfests and who are actually up front. So it's a bit of a catch-22. I mean, the hippies are the heroes pushing this, but we need to get more mainstream Americans telling people that they smoke pot so their friends vote for ballot measures to reform marijuana laws. The second thing is that we need to make people more familiar with marijuana itself. I'm not sure what the best way to do this is, because you're probably going to run into censorship issues, but people need to see marijuana as something as safe as a glass of wine. I don't know if we need to run billboards with pictures of pot leaves on them, or pictures of a bud, or we need to show people pipes, but the truth of the matter is that alcohol, for instance, could seem very menacing when you don't know what it is, but when you see a glass of wine, that's much more manageable. I think we need to do the same thing with marijuana. A couple other things. We need to continue pushing local reforms. Seattle passed Initiative 75 in 2003, and that made marijuana possession the city's lowest law enforcement priority. But what it also did is it generated a report on the impacts of the measure. And what it found was that there were no ramifications for having passed that law. And if anything, there was a benefit to passing it, because we had more law enforcement resources available. We didn't have more kids getting high, we didn't have people smoking ganja in the schoolyard, or all of the reefer madness things that we hear. And this is the armor that we use when we want to pass statewide initiatives. Whenever that happens, you've got the drug czar coming to town and says, oh my God, reefer madness, it's all going to break out, it's going to be crazy. We need these local models where we can say, no, it's not Switzerland that we're talking about where this works, and it's not Vancouver where this works in our state. So I think we need to push these local models. And lastly, this was something I was talking a bit about on the main stage, is we need to call out the reporters who continue to push this one-sided portrayal of the war on drugs. Yesterday, Vanessa Ho at the Seattle PI, she wrote an article about marijuana off in the forests, but marijuana being grown off in the national forest, and she never talks about why they're growing pot in the national parks. She doesn't call anyone like Alan St. Pierre, doesn't talk to the local elected officials who could talk about the problems with marijuana prohibition. And I think that the front lines of this drug war really is the information. People aren't going to know that it isn't working if reporters at the mainstream papers don't tell them. So we need to call out those reporters as the credulous, stupid hacks that they are when they are not giving the full information about the marijuana bust that we read in the paper. So, so that's my rant. Who wants to go next? Mikki?
Sure. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Mikki Norris. On the back side of this, it looks like Kris Krane, but okay, it says Mikki Norris. I have different hats, as Dominic or as Donnie said, but I've also brought one of my hats is the West Coast Leaf managing editor, and I brought copies in case you don't have one yet, and you can get them after my talk, after this panel. There's two scenarios we're looking forward in cannabis reform. One is if, and it really depends on the outcome of the next election. Now, if McCain wins, then we can expect more of the same, and our struggles and the whole political atmosphere and environment will be pretty much the same. So we're going to have to continue on with the LLEP initiatives, with the different kinds of the lowest law enforcement priority initiatives, things like that, and getting, you know, very incremental changes. But if Barack Obama wins, then I see that we have a real opening for change in this country, to mimic what he has to say. But as he said, change has to come from the bottom up, and that's where our role comes into this, is to let him know what we want. And one thing, I come from California, and one thing that we have going on there is a major proliferation of medical cannabis dispensaries going on there. Now, Barack Obama has indicated to us that he would call off the raids, the DEA raids. And if he does call off the raids, that would be, if that's the only thing he does in our favor, because I know he doesn't want to expend a lot of political capital for us, that would have a major impact, because it's the threat of the DEA raids that is preventing cities and counties from going forward, claiming that there's a state-federal conflict, but they're going, many of them right now are banning dispensaries in their cities and counties. However, we do have about 400 dispensaries in the state of California, all over the state. And if they call off the raids, then I can assure you we will have many more than that, because that is the threat that people are facing. So it would explode, and if it explodes in that manner, I think that it would be pretty de facto like the Dutch model of just opening up places where people get dispensaries. And in California, it's very easy to become a legal patient in there if you have some medical benefit that you can derive from using cannabis. Then good chance there's a doctor who will recommend it to you. And more people are getting, we have, I think, an estimated at least 200,000 patients who already, you know, just have the doctor's recommendations, but there's so many more that are using cannabis. So that would be a very favorable thing. If Barack Obama wins, and I encourage you all to please vote for him, that we will have a change in the ONDCP, the Office of National Drug Control Policy. He can pick more favorable people. He's in favor of research, so the research can move forward. If we can get science versus propaganda, science will win in his view, hopefully. But as I said, we're going to still have to hold him to it, because this is something that he might want to expend his political capital on. Another thing that we're moving forward in California is we have a medical cannabis safety committee that's